Good evening, UK Crime Book Club. Absolutely thrilled to bits to have Kia Abdullah here with me. So, could you introduce yourself and show off your books, please?
Yes, of course. Thank you, Sam, for having me. Hi, guys. Thank you for joining us. I am Kia Abdullah, the author of Take It Back and Truth Be Told. They are courtroom dramas set in East London, and we're going to talk a little bit more about them tonight.
Brilliant. So, we saw a little bit of you. You came and did an interview with the lovely Alex a few months ago, and I was dying to get you all to myself. So, what has been the hardest part so far with writing? How long have you been writing for? Let's give people a bit more of a background on you before I dive right in.
Yeah, of course. So, I mean, in terms of how long I've been writing for, I've been writing since I was a kid. I think I was probably 7 or 8 when I first realized that, you could write for a living. I remember my older sister telling me that, that was a profession that you could do. And I was such a nerd at school. I used to write these stories, and my teacher, bless his heart, he used to bind them for me into kind of book format. So I used to be really proud of myself, like, oh, look, here's my little book. But of course, they weren't actual books. And he was probably the first person who told me that I would be a writer. I remember when I was leaving primary school, and sorry, this is probably going back a bit more.
No, I love it. Go on.
But yeah, and he gave me a notebook and said, when you're on, public transport or the bus and you hear interesting snippets of conversation, write them down in your book and use them in your stories. And that early vote of confidence was just so incredible for a young child to hear, especially because, I've got immigrant parents, and becoming a writer isn't really, part of the repertoire of what they want you to be when you grow up. It's accountant, lawyer, doctor, that sort of thing. And so that vote of confidence was amazing. And so I was kind of writing all throughout secondary school. And but when it came to choosing my degree, I was kind of in two minds. I was like, do I follow my heart and, do a journalism degree or an English degree, or do I do something sensible? And in the end, I chose something sensible and chose computer science. And then I worked in tech for 3 years after graduation. But all throughout that time, I was writing just for myself more than anything. And then I submitted a column to Asian Woman magazine, and it got published. And that kind of reignited my ambition because, just seeing my name in print, it was something that I always wanted to do. And then when I saw it, I thought, God, this is what I really want to do. And I took a 50% pay cut. I was, I think, 24 years old. And then ever since then, I've been writing professionally. Take It Back was published last year with HarperCollins, which was amazing. And, talking about what the kind of hardest thing was, it was really getting a foot through the door. For me, the hardest thing was probably finding a literary agent. I queried dozens and dozens in the UK, got dozens and dozens of rejections. And the best piece of advice I read was, don't stop until you query 80 agents. Not all in one go, because obviously I think when you get rejections, the sensible thing to do is take that feedback on board and then work on your book, work on your query. But the interesting thing for me was I decided to query a couple of agents in the US because I follow their blogs, and 3 out of 5 agents, 3 out of the first 5 agents I queried in the US wanted it. And after trying for so long in the UK, that was incredible. And then I signed with an agent in the US, and then things kind of happened really quickly after that. Got signed with HarperCollins, and here we are.
It's fantastic. I love to hear things like that. It gives so many of our authors so much hope.
I hope so. It's a game, isn't it? And sometimes as writers, you get caught up in how successful other people are, especially on social media. People are always doing amazing things. And a little part of you is like, oh, I'm not doing as well as them. But you also need to look back. You need to remember what you have now, what you wanted back then. And so, I try to remember there are thousands of writers out there who are trying to get where I am. And so celebrate your wins, I think, is really important when you're a writer.
Yeah, it's that whole thing of knowing you're on your own path, isn't it?
Yeah, and just, they said, I always say, when you get there, there's no there. There's always the next milestone and the next goal. But I do try to just take some time and feel proud of myself. I've got author friends, and a couple of them have published one novel and are finding it hard to publish another one. And I said, look, even if one book was all you ever published, that's an incredible achievement. And so, yeah, I think it's really important to kind of remember where you were and where you are.
Absolutely, I love that. Kaz says, hi Sam and Kia. She loved Take It Back. It got 5 stars from her. Kaz doesn't give anything 5 stars. It never, seriously never happens.
Really?
Yeah,
oh, thank
never.
you. That's lovely to
She's
hear.
yeah, she's very, very, very hard to please.
Hard to please. Okay, that's amazing. Thank you.
And she says, Take It Back is based on an emotive topic. That's quite the understatement. Is there anything you wouldn't write about? I'm going to change that slightly because I think lots of authors come up with themes that they would put in, but it's the detail that they leave to the reader's imagination. So I'm going to kind of leave you to balance that awkward question.
Yeah, sure. So I'm really interested in kind of contemporary issues. So in Take It Back, for those who haven't read it, in it, a 16-year-old white girl accuses 4 Muslim boys of rape, and then that becomes a bit of a flashpoint in race relations. And so in terms of kind of contemporary issues, I don't think I would shy away from anything. But like you said, it's what you put on the page and what you choose to keep back. So in terms of kind of gratuitous details of say, the attack in the book, I kind of left that for the reader to decide without putting too much detail in. And so, yeah, I don't think I would shy from issues, but I think I would shy from details. But that's purely a decision based on, I think sometimes leaving things to the imagination is more effective than spelling things out on the page.
Yeah, I'd agree with that as a reader. I do think that sometimes you put scarier things in yourself. Sometimes it can go a bit flat if people try too hard. So, yeah, I'd agree with that.
I think so. And I think a good analogy is, I remember when, I think, was it Charlie Brooker who did that zombie program, and Simon Pegg reviewed it and said, fast zombies who are in your face and going boo are far less scary than the kind of creepy footstep that you hear upstairs. And so one's in your face and one's, off the page. And that's what I
really well. So you were saying you've been writing for I worked out about 14 years, but then I forget what year I'm in quite often.
Yeah, about 14 years.
But you write non-fiction as well.
Yes, so I started off writing non-fiction. So at Asian Woman magazine, after I published that initial column, I asked them if if there was an in-staff role, and they said yes. And that's when what I mentioned, I took the 50% pay cut to go and do. Yeah. And really, you have regrets, and for a long time I regretted not following my dream and not doing English or journalism at university. But I look back now and I think, well, those 3 years in tech allowed me to build myself a little bit of a nest egg, which allowed me to become a writer, because, as most aspiring writers watching this will know, it's not the most lucrative career unless you're, kind of stratospheric J.K. Rowling and so on. So I think all the decisions lead us to where we are. So it's been a really interesting journey. At Asian Woman magazine, I started off writing features, doing kind of interviews, interviewed people like the actress Mira Sayal, the actor Riz Ahmed. And so that really held me in good stead for a career in journalism. Like, I don't call myself a journalist, but that was kind of the training I had there. And then separate to that, I also write travel. My partner and I, we run our own travel blog, atlasandboots.com, and that's been going for about 6 years. So it's a nice balance between fiction and non-fiction.
Best place you've been?
Oh God, people ask me this all the time.
I know, it's for you, especially, it's such a ridiculous question. Top 3.
Do you know what? I would probably say Samoa, just because it's so beautiful. Ethiopia, because it's got incredible sights. So we went to Erta Ale volcano, but also it's got the Simeon Mountains. And, one thing people don't realize about Ethiopia is that it's got incredibly green mountains. And I really love New Zealand. Mountainous scenery is just stunning. So those would probably be my top 3, but it always changes.
Yeah, I bet it does. As soon as I said it, I thought, look who I'm asking. Look how many places you've been. What a question. Joe Singleton says, evening, ladies. Hi, Joe. He asked, do you feel it was more difficult to write a multi-year book due to different beliefs, etc. I think that was from Jo. Yeah, it was.
A multi-year
book. I don't know what you mean by that one, Jo. But do you think different beliefs are hard to express in a story?
I mean, look, I think because I tackled the kind of Muslim faith, that was really interesting because I've had vastly positive feedback. But a couple of people have also said, in the novel, 4 Muslim boys are accused of rape, and are you perpetuating negative tropes about Muslims? And for me, in the book, both the protagonists and the antagonists are Muslim, so both the good guys and the bad guys, so to speak.
Yeah.
I think the problem has been, a couple of people have said to me, Zara doesn't seem Muslim enough, that her name isn't Muslim enough, or even her role as a barrister isn't Muslim enough. And I find that hugely problematic, because are you saying that Muslims can't be barristers? The whole premise of the novel is that we do things both good and bad because we choose to do them as individuals. There's no such thing as a homogenous Muslim community. And so that was kind of the point of the novel. So when people, when people don't pick up the novel because they think it's going to be negative about Muslims, that does, hit me in the gut a little bit, because it's the total opposite of that.
I think you're just writing about people. So yeah, there are different races, different faiths, different ages, different sexes. You're writing about people, and you write them so well.
Oh, thank you. I mean, it was really important for me to kind of tackle that kind of tribalism aspect as well. So in the novel, Zara Khalil, who is an ex-barrister turned rape counsellor, and she's tasked with helping Jodie, the 16-year-old girl. And in the novel, her local community, as well as her family, kind of criticize her because they say, well, you're Muslim, how can you be pitting yourself against these 4 Muslim boys? You're supporting the white girl. And that in itself is stripping her of her individuality and saying, well, just because you're X, you should be doing Y. And that was really important for me to show those two sides and the tension when you're told, well, you're one of us, so you can't be one of them, or vice versa. And so that's one of the kind of underlying themes of the book as well.
Yeah, and really, what she's doing is supporting a victim.
Exactly.
That's how it opens out, that she's victim support. That's her role, and she's blooming good at it. And she's got good instincts. She has got really good instincts for when something, even if she doesn't know what it is, she's got that instinct for that something doesn't feel right there. What is it? What am I picking up on?
She has a conversation with her mum, and her mother saying to her, why are you doing this? And she says, am I supposed to align myself with these boys just because of their faith? And for me, that was a really key message in the novel, that we don't, we're not black and white. There are many gradations of our personality. As I said, there's no such thing as a Muslim community, and it's useful as a kind of shortcut to tackle things like Islamophobia. But when you come to a narrative in fiction, there are many gradations of what we are. And so to expect someone to write a purely positive story, I think, is painting them in the same broad brushes that kind of certain quarters of the media do with Muslims.
And it's just perpetuating the problem.
Exactly.
It's just not, it's just not, it's not what you should be doing. You should be exploring everything, every individual, every person.
Your role is to challenge narratives. Your role is to challenge thinking. And so when someone picks up my book thinking, oh, well, these four Muslim boys are clearly the antagonists, but I've tried really hard to have a variety of kind of personalities or values in those 4 boys, just to show that they within themselves are individuals, but also for the reader to have loyalties on both sides of the case. Do they believe Jodie? Do they believe the 4 boys? Who is telling the truth here? And one of the things that I'm most proud of is that people say to me at the end, I really didn't know who to believe, and I was supporting one side and then the other, and my loyalties kept flipping over. And that was a very conscious decision when I set out to write Take It Back.
Yeah, and how hard was that to achieve?
For me, with regards to the 4 boys, I think 2 of them are kind of more in the novel than the other 2. And I think you build a character just as you would anybody else. And it was important for me to show, that one is the kind of moral heart of the story, one is a little bit more callous, one's studious, one's not. And for me, because I grew up in a Muslim family, they're not any harder or easier to write than any other characters. They're just young boys to me. And so I built them as I would any other character. But yeah, I just hope that I've done them justice, and that they're three-dimensional characters. They're not kind of something to hang my plot on. They are actually full-bodied characters.
Yeah, you like I was saying before, you've written about people. It's that simple. So all of the boys, none of them, they might have similarities. They're all different. And Jodie and her mum, that's should we say fractious? Is that?
Yes. Yes. I mean, it's tricky because when you're writing working class characters, that's another level of responsibility as well. So I come from a working class background, and it's very easy to paint certain classes in a certain way. And so for me, again, that was really important. And with her mother, there were points when I thought, am I taking this a little bit too far? Because in the novel, her mother doesn't support Jodie, and probably verges on verbal abuse, I would say. But then in my real life, I've heard things like this. I used to live in a block of flats, and the neighbours upstairs were a little bit like Jodie's mum, and that's where I kind of got the inspiration for that character. And so, yeah, there's a lot in the novel, and yeah, it was a bit of a balancing act, but I hope that I've carried it off.
I'd say you've definitely carried it off really well.
Oh, thank you.
Right, we have moved through a lot of questions, and that's without even the ones that have been sent beforehand and the ones that I've written. You're a very popular lady. So would you be tempted to follow up on the young people from Take It Back? That's from Caroline.
Oh, that's a good question. I haven't thought of that. To be honest, I didn't write Take It Back as the first in a series at all. But Zara does return in Truth Be Told, the next novel. It's a completely different case. So it's, in a way, it's a follow-up, but it's not a sequel in that you don't revisit the boys. My next novel will be a standalone, but my publishers really love Zara, and I think they would love for me to kind of return to her. So who knows about the fourth book? Zara may well be back, and we might hear more about the boys. But for me, I kind of feel like their story is finished.
How about book 3? So can you tell us the title? Can you give us anything yet?
Yes, so book 3, it's called Next of Kin, and it follows two sisters. I haven't kind of like done the elevator pitch in my head yet because I haven't talked about it at all, but let me try. So it follows two sisters. One is a mother and one is not. What happens one day is the aunt in the relationship is asked to drop Max, the 4-year-old boy, off to school. She agrees. She takes him off to school, drives to the office, and then 2 hours later, she gets a phone call from her brother-in-law and says, Max was never dropped off at school. Where is he? And she realizes that in her kind of autopilot, she left Max in the car and just came straight to the office. And so she rushes back to the car, and it's kind of the fallout of that between the two sisters, and the kind of court case of whether she left Max on purpose or was it accidental. And it's also a kind of commentary on how we treat mothers in society, the immense pressures we put on them to, have the right equipment, the right safety equipment, to make sure that they're there for their kids. But also conversely, how we treat women who also choose not to have children, and how they're painted as kind of cold-hearted or selfish. And so it's the kind of dichotomy about, you can't really win whether you're a mother or not. No. And so it tackles those issues. But again, like Take It Back and Truth Be Told, I like to think that, if you want to read them as a pure kind of page turner for those who love courtroom dramas, you can do that. But it also has a kind of deeper layer. In Take It Back, it was race and faith. In Truth Be Told, it's toxic masculinity and the way we treat young men. And in the third one, it's, motherhood and how we treat women who do and don't choose to have children.
Why did you choose to initially start Zara off as a lawyer in a big firm?
Yeah, so Zara started off life as a barrister, and in fact, in the first draft, she was going to be prosecuting the case. Um, but then, because of the way the British legal system works, prosecutors can't really talk to the complainant. So, in the novel, that would be Jodie.
Right,
And it was really important for me to have that relationship between Zara and Jodie, because that's quite central to the story. And so I thought, well, is it more important for me to have Zara be the one who's, standing up in court and representing the prosecution, or is it more important for me to have that complicated but tender relationship between her and Jodie? And I thought it was the latter. So I decided to kind of give her a bit more of a behind the scenes role. And I spoke to a couple of women who work as independent sexual violence advisors, and the work they do is immensely valuable. And so that was really the inspiration behind Zara. And if she does come back, I've left the door open for her to practice law again. Maybe she will come back as more of a lawyer, standing up in the courtroom, but I'm not sure yet.
Fair enough. Alex did leave a question for you beforehand, which was, in Take It Back, you focused on disability. Do you know anyone personally that helped you develop empathy for the character? I think it would be impossible not to have empathy for her. Anyway.
Well, I hope so. I mean, Jodie started off, as an idea in my head. And because the book is so much about how we judge people based on what they look like and what they believe in, I thought it would be interesting to have Jodie be born with facial differences. And that adds another layer of, is she telling the truth? Because a lot of people just assume that because she looks different, that these four handsome young men wouldn't force themselves on her. And again, that plays into the theme of the novel of, just because you look like this doesn't mean that you behave in a way that people expect you to. And so I spoke to a school friend of mine who helped me. I went to school with her for 5 years. And the funny thing is, I never really addressed her facial differences when we were at school. It was just one of those things, but she kindly helped me and, just spoke about some of the more poignant aspects of what she's faced in life, and how it affected her self-esteem and her confidence growing up. And so she helped kind of add more depth to Jodie. And so I was really grateful to her for that.
So it always amazes me how much time people give to authors just to make sure that things are just so.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I've been blown away by the generosity. I'm not a lawyer, and so I kind of enlisted the help of a barrister, 2 solicitors, doctors, as I said, sexual violence advisors, my school friend. And for for truth be told, there's fencing scenes in there, there's hunting scenes in there, and so I had to talk to a fencer, I had to talk to a hunter, and it takes a lot of effort to get the details right. But what I always say about research is you do as much as you can. You do 100%, but then you pull it back to 70% for the sake of the story. For example, in a real life court case, you might have 3 different police officers performing a task, but for the sake of the story, you don't want to introduce 3 different characters for the reader to remember when they don't really warrant a character of their own. And so you kind of melt them together into one. And so technically it might not be accurate, but for the sake of the story, you take a little bit of creative license.
Yeah, it makes far more sense to have 3 people as one rather than trying to dot people in and fit them in for the sake of it.
Yeah, and I think you can get obsessed with the technical detail. And I think some authors fall foul of this because they're quite keen to show how much research they've put. And so there are kind of dry patches of technical detail. And I remember calling my police contact at one point and saying, what's the text of evidence bags? And he said, Kia, I don't think anybody will judge you for getting that wrong. I mean, some probably would, but I think then I gave myself a little bit of a license. I said, look, I probably will get things wrong, as a lot of authors do, but it's okay as long as you've written a good story that's believable, then you've done your job.
We had a chat with Malcolm Holland, who's another author, and he has written a book about a soldier with PTSD, and he asked an expert how much Semtex would be needed to blow up something, and he was like, nobody knows that, just enough. So that's what it says, because there's just some details that aren't necessary.
Yeah, I was interviewing a pathologist and I said to him, he said, oh, a child left in a hot car would have stress ulcers. And I said, well, how many? And he said, lots. And I said, well, how many is lots? And he said, well, it's not a case of, 10 or 20 is 10 or 20 times the stress. Even one is enough. So just put lots in the novel. No one's going to question you. So yeah, I think sometimes you just step back. But, as always, you want to get things right and you want the readers to trust you. And sometimes it is annoying when you get things wrong and take it back. I got something wrong. At Limehouse Station, somebody goes up the stairs instead of down the stairs to the platform. And I live in Limehouse. I grew up there. Sorry, it wasn't Limehouse, it was Bow Church. But in my head, I was picturing Limehouse because that's where I grew up. And I got that detail wrong and somebody pointed it out. And even though some would say, oh, look, it's fine. For me, it's like, well, I grew up in East London. Like, I know it like the back of my hand, and I was annoyed that I got that wrong. So I emailed my editor. I was like, can we correct this for the paperback? So yeah, I mean, I can understand why you do try really hard to get the details right.
Yeah, it makes sense, but there's no point driving yourself insane over
Exactly. Good philosophy.
I keep looking down because there's so many questions that I can't see who they're from. So Andrew Davis has said, when I started writing, I was told to write about what you know. Your ancestry is Asian and Muslim, so it's obvious you'll write about this continent and faith. I thought this was going to be a question, but actually it's a comment. Carry on. Haters will always hate. Good for you.
No, thank you.
Actually, that was a comment that I thought was going to be a question. We have got so many on here. Joe Singleton. As someone involved in technology, did you use the paper and pen approach or type direct to computer?
I type directly to computer. I know some writers who do write longhand, and I have huge amounts of respect for them. But for me, my first draft is just so terrible that I need that space to go back and edit and repolish. And so for me, it's definitely technology all the way. In fact, I switched from Google Docs to Scrivener. I don't know how many of you use Scrivener, and that was a bit of a revelation. I'd always heard that it was really good for writing novels, and I swapped earlier this year, and that has been really good because then you can trace a character throughout the manuscript without doing it manually. So any kind of aspiring writers out there, I would advise getting Scrivener for your novel. They're not paying me.
I will be having a look. Joe corrected his earlier question. He said it was meant to be multi-race, not multi-year. So, right. But I think we covered it anyway.
Yeah, thank you.
I already know the answer to this, but is Kia short for something else?
Kia is just Kia. I always say that I want to extend it to Saskia because I think it sounds a little classier. Saskia. She sounds quite fierce, but no, Kia's just Kia, I'm afraid.
I think Kia is fierce enough for both of you.
Thank you.
You've depicted East London really well. Why did you set it there, and how did you research the area? Well, we know that you lived there.
Yeah, so I lived there. I was born and raised in East London. And apart from the mistake that I made about Bow Church Station, please forgive me for that. I know East London really well. And I think when you've seen an area evolve and evolve in some sections, you are really well placed to kind of capture the spirit of an area. And for me, it was just a compelling setting because of its history. It's got a little bit of a gritty, darker edge to it. It's got so many different cultures. And so it just naturally lends itself to drama and tension and conflict. And so that's why I chose to set it there.
And that was from Suzanne, I think it's Suzanne Lay, it's L-A-I. I'm always quite careful with names because I'm Mancunian and terrible. Not that Mancunians are terrible, I'm just going to move on. Jason Kelly, hi Jason, has asked, are we likely to see Child's Play back in print again?
Right, so Child's Play was a novel that I wrote many years ago, and it was published by a very small press. And I look back now and I cringe a little bit because I don't think I'd found my voice yet as a writer. Okay. And so people who really love Take It Back say to me, I'm seeking out your old books. And I'm like, please actually don't. I don't want my old publisher to sue me, but I just don't feel like I found my voice as a writer. And I kind of wish that I just waited. I was when you're in your 20s, you're in a rush to get published. You're in a rush to get your work out there. And that's another thing I say to writers, just take your time. you don't have to have another career after this one. Just take your time building this one. Your first novel is always going to be your first novel, so make sure that you're proud of it. So I don't think we'll see it in print again, and actually I'm quite happy about that. Is the truth.
That is very, very honest. I think sometimes it's nice to see before and after. Before the voice, and then you see the journey.
Yeah, and I've been blogging for so long. I mean, I don't do it regularly anymore, but I was, blogging at had like a blogspot, a blogger.com, I think it was called back then, for many years. And throughout my 20s, I was blogging, and then I moved to WordPress, and I don't really do it anymore. But people could probably go back 10 years and hopefully see how much I've improved as a writer. But at the same time, it's probably going to be a little bit embarrassing for me. So please don't do that.
Caroline wants to know, why did you choose to write courtroom dramas? So we've talked a little bit about lawyers, barristers, things like that.
For me, it's just it's ripe for tension, because the British legal system is adversarial. So you automatically have two sides that are pitted against each other. The stakes are usually pretty high. So, someone could lose their liberty. Someone may have already lost their life. And the other thing that really attracts me is writing about kind of contemporary issues. And in a courtroom setting, you often get the most vulnerable people in society passing through the courtrooms. And so that naturally lends itself to writing kind of social commentary. But also, I think a courtroom setting is so compelling for the reader. You sit in on the jury. I think that's one of the things that readers have most enjoyed about Take It Back, certainly in terms of the feedback that I've received. They've said I really felt like part of the jury. I didn't know who was right or wrong. I call them courtroom dramas. I suppose they're a little bit like, I don't know how many of you guys read Jodi Picoult. She kind of writes contemporary dramas, but in a courtroom setting. And I love her books. And so I wanted to write something in a similar vein. So that's what attracted me to the kind of courtroom setting.
Alex Shaw asked plotter or pantser, which you've kind of covered a bit, but are you so I know that you use a laptop, you type. Do you have ideas of where you're going before you begin, or do you just sit down with a basic idea and just go?
I'm definitely a plotter, and so I need to know the kernel of the book. So like I said, for Take It Back, it was a white girl accuses four Muslim boys of rape. For Truth Be Told, it's young boy, 17. He goes to an elite all-male boarding school in London, and he has an ambiguous sexual encounter with a fellow pupil, and wakes up the next day and has to ask himself, did he actually consent to what took place? So I have to have a kernel of an idea to go with, and then I do sit down and I plot, the beginning, middle, and end, because I find the idea terrifying to just sit at your laptop and write. I know so many writers who do that, but they're clearly more skilled than I am, because I find that really scary. And so, yeah, I plot. I plot kind of chapter level, so I know what's happening in each chapter. I try not to do kind of scene by scene, because then it becomes a little bit like paint by numbers. You're kind of ticking off boxes, and you also want to give a story room to breathe. And so I'm definitely a plotter.
It always makes me laugh that people always say, oh, they must be so skilled if they plot, they must be so skilled if they pants. Everybody feels the same. They always think the other side's got it better. Right. Everybody. It's very, very rare. There's not many people who disagree.
Fair enough.
Jenny O'Brien, the lovely Jenny O'Brien, hello, says hi, everyone. So Joe Singleton asked, do you carry out your own research, or do you have a black book of contacts to assist you? So I know that you have experts that you go to, but do you collate everything yourself?
Yes, so I have monster spreadsheets. I think for books, for Next of Kin, there were about 300 questions that I had to get experts to answer. And so, yeah, everything's in there in a massive list. And in terms of a black book, not really. I had to kind of collect them. I remember for Take It Back, I was looking for a barrister to answer some questions. And I remember back then I was on Reddit. I don't know how many of you use Reddit, but it's not known for being particularly polite. Certainly not in the kind of subreddit I posted in. And I said, oh, does anybody know a barrister who might be able to help me? I can't really afford to pay them, but, would they be willing to guide a young author? And I just got lots of rude replies saying, oh, do you have any idea how much British barristers cost per hour? And so I kind of, with my tail between my legs, I deleted the post. And then I just shot off emails to like 5 random barristers that I found online, that were, named to one of these kind of award-winning barristers sort of lists. And a couple of them volunteered their time. One was incredibly generous, inviting me to chambers. And I've known him for 3 years now, and I keep roping him back into doing work for me. So one day when my books go stratospheric, I'll start paying him. So Matthew, if you're watching, thank you. I very appreciate your time. But no, I just email people, and I've been blown away by the generosity.
That's lovely. I always think it's just amazing how much support authors get.
Yeah.
You are woefully underpaid, most authors. So it's nice that people give the time.
That's the other thing, isn't it? Like, without giving too much away, the Society of Authors says the average author earns £10,000 a year. And so there's that weird dichotomy where, because you're a published author, people think you're super wealthy. And then the reality is, well, you're not, unless your book sells, hundreds and thousands of copies, which is very rare. And so I remember going around my best friend's house after Take It Back was published, and she said something like, well, you're loaded now, aren't you? And I said, I wish, but no. So the truth is, it takes a long time.
Yeah, it takes a long time. It takes time to build up a following, all of the other things. It must drive you insane, things like social media and events like this. Not insane in a bad way, but there are so many things to do just so that you can get paid for the actual work that you do. That must be maddening sometimes.
Yeah, well, thankfully I enjoy it. I've got a tech background, so kind of the whole Zoom stuff hasn't really thrown me, but I enjoy it. I'm not one of these authors who are introverted. I like going out there. I'm energized by meeting new people. I'm energized by socializing and talking to people. So that side of things doesn't really bother me hugely. I suppose the difficult thing is when some books get anointed as the chosen one of the year, and you probably know which ones have been kind of blanket coverage in the media. And so when you've written a book and you see the kind of anointed ones getting so much press, you think, oh, can my little book get a little corner of publicity? And so I think that can be a little bit hard, but you try your best. You're out there on social media. I enjoy being on Twitter. I'm on Instagram as well. But yeah, I understand if it doesn't come to you naturally, it is hard. I remember when I started, my agent said, you've got to just be on the channels that you enjoy. There's no pressure on you to be on Pinterest or Snapchat or TikTok, if you don't enjoy those things. And for me, Twitter's probably the platform that I'm most active on. And then I am on Instagram. I post more to Instagram stories than my main account, but I'm on there because I enjoy it. I think if you're forcing it, it's probably a little bit obvious to your readers / audience. And so, if it doesn't come to you naturally, I can understand why it would be maddening.
Yeah. Somebody has asked, do you narrate your own audiobooks? And I can't. Oh, that's from Joe as well. Hi, Joe. So
no, and thank God, because my audiobook narrator is amazing. So Tanya does the voice of Zara and the main characters, and then there's a few more like Jodie and the boys in the book. And for me, I'm a writer, and so writing is the thing that I love most. And the audiobook was always kind of peripheral, but when I heard it, I was just blown away. It really added an extra dimension to my words, and I was just so proud of what they did with it. And often when I'm asked to do readings, I think, well, can I just bring the audiobook and can I just play that? Because they do such a better job than me. So the short answer is no. Often I think when you write non-fiction or certainly memoir, then the publishers will expect you to narrate your book. But I think with fiction, it's usually different. They tend to get professional actors in to do it.
Would you ever fancy a cameo?
Oh, maybe. Now that you mention it, maybe I'll have to talk to my editor, but maybe just a very short one because, yeah, I don't know if I'd be any good at it.
Maybe you could, I don't know, just something small, wet your feet. See how
Yeah,
you get on.
maybe. I quite like the idea of it, just another string to my bow. But for now, I'll leave it to Tanya. She's so much better at it than me.
Lots of authors do it, though, don't they? On TV, you'll see people just appearing, walking across the background.
Yeah,
I was
yeah.
watching Goosebumps with my daughter, and I was like, "There's R.L. Stein," and she's like, "Who?" I was like, "He wrote the books. He wrote," and she's like, "Oh, okay." She has no interest in authors, my youngest daughter, whatsoever.
Right.
Me sitting here now, she's like, "I know I've put them off books. It's really sad."
No, I mean, Stephen King does a lot of cameos. He turned up in, I think he turned up in the recent book. So if it ever got made into a movie, maybe I'd have like a little walk-on role playing a shopkeeper or something.
Have you got ideas in your head for people who would play the different parts?
I've been asked this before, and the only person I've got an idea about is Zara. So I don't know if any of you watched The Punisher on Netflix. I thought it was really good. And there was a character in it called Dina Madani, who's played by an actress called Amber Rose Reva. And I always thought that she would make a really good Zara. So Amber, one day, maybe call me and we can talk. But, I mean, film and TV, they're kind of long-term things. Even when you sell rights, it takes years for things to get made. So again, coming back to what I said before, for me, I've always been a writer, and like that's the main thing that I've always wanted to do, and anything else is just a bonus.
I am going to do a non-crime plug. My daughter actually came down with Tom Fletcher from McFly's The Christmasaurus, and she said, "Mom, we need to start reading again." I was like, "Yay." And then she was like, "But tomorrow," and that was like 3 days ago. But it's a start. We're getting there. I love The Christmasaurus. Can't really read my stuff to the things that I read to my kids.
Sure.
So we have got Daniel McBreakneck. Hi, Daniel. Take It Back's a really good book. Highly recommended. I look forward to reading more. And Andrew Davis says, as a disabled reader, thank you for dealing with disability in a caring way, which is really lovely. It must be really nice when you get really positive, constructive, useful feedback like that shows that you've got something just right.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely really heartening because, when there's a debate about cultural appropriation, are you well placed to discuss or write about a character who you don't, whose characteristics you don't embody yourself? Where I fall is, you should be able to write about those things, but as long as you do it in a really sensitive, authentic way. And so you're taking the time to talk to the right people. It's not just a plot device to keep the story going. If the reader can empathize with that person, put themselves in their shoes and really engage with the issues in the book, then I think you've done your job as an author.
Yeah, I think it's fair for all authors. Every character is going to embody something that you've probably not experienced. So it's not pretending that that's your story and just telling theirs.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, one of the things I say, a good litmus test is, are there stories like this out there being told? And so, authors have got in trouble for getting kind of 7-figure deals for, I said, co-opting, someone else's identity. And I think just a very quick litmus test is, are there these stories being told by, own voices authors? And if not, then maybe take a step back. But if there are, then go ahead. I don't think that there should be restrictions on authors, but again, with the caveat that, you're doing the research and you're putting the work in.
Yeah, absolutely agree with that. Joe wants to know, has lockdown had any effect on your writing?
It did at the beginning. So when it hit, the first kind of wave in March, for a good few weeks, my productivity was really low. And then I kind of just settled into a bit of a new normal. And I hear lots of authors saying this, you've just got to get on with it. I know I had a deadline, a November deadline for next of kin, and so I just had to get on with it. I'm lucky in that I'm not a naturally anxious person. You know, I do have friends who felt very anxious during this time, haven't gone out because they've been frightened. But for me, you know, I've got mechanisms to cope. You know, I find it really important to kind of get out for a walk every day, get out into nature. I'm lucky that I've got 5 sisters, so you know, if I'm ever feeling stressed, I can talk to one of my sisters. So I've got a very strong support system, and now I've hit a rhythm. You know, I'm quite disciplined. I write 1,500 words a day. Not always very good words, but you know, that's what editing is for. So the second lockdown, it's been hard because just the weather's bad. You know, I'm not going out as much, and I did think it would all be over by now. You know, as did we all. But you've just got to keep on writing. And one thing it has taught me is the value of being a writer. You know, I always, because I come from a working class background, I always saw a writing career as a little bit of an indulgence, you know, that it's not a real job. But in lockdown, you know, as you've seen on Twitter, lots of people have said, you know, what are the things that we're reaching for? It's Netflix, you know, it's good movies, it's good music, it's good books. And so art has a genuinely valuable place in society. And as a writer, I feel I've learned that I'm adding value. And so that's something not to be scoffed at, and, you know, something to be proud of.
Something that I've absolutely built my life around. I mean, we've both got books behind us with, you know, we're both readers. Who are your go-to readers? Kaz always calls them their your shut up and give me your money authors, ones that you just buy anything without knowing what it's going to be.
Right, yeah, so there are a few. So in terms of crime, you know, there's Claire McIntosh and Jane Harper, who are just brilliant, you know, masterly at what they do. I love Jodie Picoult, who I've mentioned. In terms of literary fiction, I love Donna Tartt. You can't see, but I've got all 3 of her novels over there. I've read The Goldfinch over, you know, this year actually, and so, you know, she is just a master at what she does. Jeffrey Eugenides, I love. Khaled Hosseini, and so there are lots. You know, I could talk to you about this all day, Sam.
I know. I don't know why I asked this question, because it's one of those. If you said to me favourite authors, I'd be like, really?
Now, who are yours?
Just no.
Take my money.
There's just it's impossible. I have a list, but it's grown so much since joining the book club. The most recent book I've raved about is A Long Way From Home by Brian Caves.
Has been,
I don't get me started. I interviewed him and I just went on for about 40 minutes about how fantastic it was, and then we were like on talking afterwards for ages and ages after the
I just love
interview.
books like that are, you know, ostensibly crime, but they hit you where, you know, they hit you in your heart. And I'm really looking forward to reading We Begin at the End by Chris Whitaker, because I keep reading like amazing things about that novel. You know, people saying it's a little bit like Where the Crawdads Sing, you know, and so I'm really looking forward to that. It's on my Kindle waiting as a treat.
It's actually coming for an interview with Sheila Bugler soon. And I wish I had the date to hand, and I've not got my diary with me, which I always have it just at the side
please
of me.
Please ping me so I can join.
Absolutely will do. Right, favourite character or relationship that you've created. Doesn't have to be a romantic one, and it doesn't have to be a good one, but
relationship. I love, in Take It Back and Truth Be Told, the dynamic between Zara and Safran, her best friend. Because so often in fiction, when you have a female and a male character, you know, they always hook up, or there's always kind of romantic tension between them, but their relationship is purely platonic, but they are really there for each other. And for me, it was a way to kind of explore some of the issues that I've experienced in real life. You know, I've mentioned growing up with kind of tribalism, where I've always been a little bit on the more progressive side of my faith. But there are people who say, well, you know, if you drink alcohol, then you're not a real Muslim, or if you don't pray 5 times a day, you're not a real Muslim. And so their relationship gave me a chance to just show a different side of, you know, of your faith. And so many people have written to me and said, you know, I love Safran, I love Zara, I see myself in them. And not just Muslims, but, you know, Sikhs, Hindus who've grown up in really conservative South Asian families have said, you know, these are people who reflect me. And so that's made me really proud. And so that's probably the relationship I'm most proud of. But also Zara's relationship with her mum. That was really interesting and almost quite cathartic, because my relationship with my mum is quite similar in that she wants the best for me, but you also feel a little bit trying to be very careful.
Don't want to get into trouble.
Trying not to get into trouble. But yeah, I mean, those sorts of relationships with parents can sometimes feel a little bit stifling because of the expectations put on you. And so, again, I think a lot of young women recognize themselves in Zara and her relationship with her mum. So that was important for me too.
Kaz has commented that it's on the 5th of December. I was convinced it was later in December, so I'm rubbish. Joe says, great to hear Kia sending out very positive messages, which is always nice.
Thank you, Joe.
So there are lots of tricky dynamics. How do you balance that with keeping some positivity as well? Because you do that really well.
In the novels, you mean? I think it's just, again, characterization. You know, that's really important. Obviously, with crime fiction, plot is key. But I think without characters that you care about, a plot can kind of fall away. And so it's just about building characters that people care about, giving them challenges, but not challenges that break them. And so they come through on the other side in a hopeful way. There are moments in Take It Back where, for example, Jodie is given a little bag from Starbucks from Zara, and she says something like, oh, there's a sandwich in there. And as she's heading out, she says, oh, and there's a lemon muffin in there, your favorite. And Jodie just gets struck for a second, because all throughout her life, no one's really cared enough to know her favorite anything. And so it's just moments like that you want to build into a relationship, where you kind of expose the hopefulness and the tenderness in your characters and the dynamics between them. So yeah, for me, it's all about character.
Alex sent a couple more questions as well beforehand, and he's just asked another on the stream. When it comes to family dynamics in your series, how did you develop it between books 1 and 2? It's a good question.
Yeah, so again, Zara and Zara's mum, they appear in both books. And so in the first one, her relationship with her mum is a little bit fraught. The tension there is because her mum thinks that she shouldn't be siding with Jodie, the young victim, and going against these 4 boys. And they kind of lock heads a lot over that. In the second one, it's a little bit more tender, because she grows to understand that her mum is trying her best with her and has always wanted the best for her, even though that doesn't always manifest in a positive way. And so their dynamic has improved a little bit, and you also see her relationship with her brother evolve a little bit. So in the first one, he's quite domineering, he's quite imperious. He expects that because he's the older brother, for him to be able to dictate to Zara what she should do. And in the second book, in Truth Be Told, we kind of see a little bit more tenderness from him. And because it's about toxic masculinity, Zara also grapples with the fact that, she's always looked at her brother as this domineering character. But what's behind that? Is it because when he was younger, he was taught that, to be a strong man, you have to be commanding, and you can't show emotion, you can never cry, and all these toxic things that we teach our young men. How has that manifest in his personality? And so she comes to understand that it's not necessarily him, it's the culture that he's grown up in, it's the messages that he gets from society. Even now, when we cry in public, or we see a man crying in public, that makes us uncomfortable, and it shouldn't be that way. And so yeah, that relationship has kind of softened as well.
One of my favourite questions that I like to ask is your most memorable moments as an author so far.
Oh, okay. I would say holding my hardback for the first time. And so I was at Waterstones, invited to give like a little talk. And I hadn't seen the hardback yet. And the sales manager thought I had, and she just handed it to me and said, oh, if you want to read from this. And I just stopped for a second. I was like, oh my God, it's here. So that was a really lovely moment. And I think just getting amazing feedback from readers has been lovely. Again, when I get feedback from South Asian women who've grown up in the kind of environment I have, where on one hand you want to be upholding all the expectations put on you, but on the other hand, you want to set your own course in life. When I get feedback from them saying, you know, I could see myself in Zara, then I know that I've done my job, and that makes me really proud.
Have any of your sisters read your books?
All of them have read the first one, and I think the second one came out in September, and all of them have been so busy with, you know, lockdown and all of that. So I think 2 have, and the others haven't. Funnily enough, the one that it's dedicated to hasn't even bought a copy yet. So, last time I texted her, I don't think she realizes yet that it's dedicated to her. I texted her, I said, have you bought Physical Told yet? And she said, I'm skint. I get paid on Friday, so I'll buy a copy then. So I'm still waiting for her to text me and say, thank you for dedicating a book to me. Little sisters, eh?
That's really fun. I haven't got any actual biological sisters, so something I quite envy. But, I've got 2 daughters, so, and my son as well, but 2 daughters, so that's nice. I always say that's a nice way to,
I've got a bit of an embarrassment of riches when it comes to sisters. I've got 5 of them. I feel very lucky.
Do you read your reviews, and have you had any strange 1-star reviews? I need to refresh my phone and see who that's from. Joe Singleton again.
Hi, Joe. I definitely read the reviews in papers, in newspapers, and so on. Yeah, I don't think I've come across any negativity in kind of broadsheets or official media. I did start off reading kind of Goodreads and Amazon reviews, but they've largely been positive. I'm trying to think if I have read 1-star reviews that have hurt. I just think, you know, I used to write comments, and when you write comments, you know, you get so much negative feedback because people are always going to disagree with what you say. So for me, it's a little bit like water off a duck's back. You know, I'm inured to that sort of feedback. And also I try to remember it's not personal. Look, not everybody's going to love my book. I don't love every book that I read, and so I can't expect people to love my book. And so, you know, sometimes you do get people out to hurt you, but I think largely it's when someone doesn't gel with your book, and that's their prerogative. And so I really try not to take it personally, and I'm pretty good with that. I think it doesn't really hurt.
That's good. There's more questions, but we are almost out of time. Do you want to give us a little recap on the books and show off your book covers again so people know what they're looking for?
Yeah, so again, this is Take It Back. This is the paperback. The hardback is in black and white. As I mentioned, in this, 16-year-old girl called Jodie accuses 4 Muslim boys of rape, and it follows the court case, which becomes a bit of a explosive trial in London. And then, truth be told, follows Cameron Hadid, a 17-year-old boy who attends an elite all-male boarding school in London and has an ambiguous sexual encounter with a fellow pupil, and isn't sure whether he consented to what happened or not. And again, they can be read as pure page-turners, but they also engage with deeper social issues.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Thank you for everybody's questions as well. It's really nice to have so much input from the members as well tonight.
It's been so much fun. Thank you.